first fruits, and then 49 days after first fruits, you have Shavuot. The controversy revolves around the meaning of the phrase, the day after the Sabbath. The seventh day, the weekly Shabbat, is called, obviously, Sabbath, but also all the holy days, the Moedim of Leviticus 23, are also referred to as Sabbaths. So the question is, does the Shabbat in Leviticus 23 refer to the seventh day or to the holy days of Pesach or Chag HaMatzot, Feast of Unleavened Bread? Today, Yom HaBikurim is celebrated on the day after the Feast of Unleavened Bread. There's 3 holy days in a row: Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits. This is how the Pharisees, the Septuagint, Josephus, they all understood this to be the sequencing of God's holy days. Joshua chapter 5, verse 11 also suggests that the first fruit would come directly after the Feast of Unleavened Bread. However, in the first century, the Sadducees and the community at Qumran, they wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, understood the day after the Shabbat to mean the day after the first weekly Shabbat after Passover. So if Passover fell on a Tuesday, for instance, the day after the Sabbath would mean the day after the Saturday that followed that Passover, which means that it would always fall on Sunday, the first day of the week. Now, the Sadducees controlled the biblical calendar and the temple ceremonies in the first century, and therefore Sunday was the day of celebration for both Yom HaBikurim, first fruits, and Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks. Yeshua doesn't address this controversy directly. I'm sort of sad about that, but, you know, I've stopped giving God advice. I don't like the spankings. He doesn't address it directly, and it was a large controversy in the first century. But his silence is almost a placid kind of affirmation. He does rise on the day after the Sabbath that followed Passover. He rose on Sunday. And 50 days later, the people who were gathered in the upper room waiting for power on high also were there on Sunday. I therefore reason, although it's somewhat circular, that first fruits and Shavuot both were to be celebrated on the day after the first Shabbat following Passover. And that's why we do it that way here. Leviticus 23 also suggests this understanding. There shall be 7 complete Sabbaths. That to me simply means 7 Saturdays, and then the next day would be the 50th day. I give that explanation because I've had some people ask me, because they've been confused why we celebrate on a Sunday rather than following the rabbinic calendar. The rabbis are the children of the Pharisees, so they follow the Pharisaic calendar. Shavuot is described by our sages as Zaman Matan Toratenu, the season of the giving of the Torah. It was believed that indeed, on Shavuot, 50 days after we were set free from slavery, we came to Mount Sinai and heard the blast of the shofar, and God spoke the 10 words. At the foot of Sinai, God